Sometimes our applications may have really long tables with a whole lot of sections. You'll see this really commonly in a contact list, where we have contacts with last names for each letter in the alphabet. And you may also see a little helpful list on the side of the table view with the letters A, B, C, and you can flip through the list really quickly and get to letter Z without having to scroll through every single contact in the list. You can also see that when there's a categorized list. For instance, if I have animals, there may be an index that calls out mammals and fish and birds, rather than having to scroll through every bird in order to get to the mammals. So an index can be a really useful feature, and it's also really easy to put in. So we're going to add one to the table view that we've been working on in the last 3 lessons. Again, our storyboard just simply has a table view and a referencing outlet. So nothing's changed there again. We're working solely in code. Now let's just kind of review where we are in this code. We've added a number of interfaces that our view controller inherits from. We have the Uitableview data source, Uitableview delegate, and UI action sheet delegate. The data source is fairly obvious. It says here's the table's data source, here's the row data, section data, and the cell data. The table view delegate helps us handle events from user taps. And the UI action sheet delegate helps us with accessory taps. We have a string variable called cell ID, and cell ID is used for our reusable cell prototype. We also have a new variable called index array, and this is going to give us the list of strings for our indexes. We don't have to use the cell data to create our index. We can have completely independent arrays, and that's actually what I've got here. As an aside, we've been building up our cell data just basically in code using numbers. We of course can use an array for our data, or basically any kind of queryable data. Quite often you'll be getting data from a database, and you'll be querying the rows as we go along. We'll actually see that when we work with data. So we've set our table views data source and delegate properties to ourselves because we're implementing the data source and delegate interfaces. We've implemented the number of sections in the table view and said we're returning 5. We also have implemented the number of rows in a section. So every time we get a section call, we run a little bit of math to return the number of rows that are going to be in that section. And then we create a cell for row at index path. And we have our reusable cell that we can use with that identifier. If we haven't created a cell yet, we do create a new one with a default style. And we added the accessory type detailed disclosure button. We also set our cell background color and our text label. And our text label just says section number, row number. We implemented functions for the title for the header in the section and the title for the footer in the section. We also implemented the function didSelectRow at index path, which occurs when the user taps a row. And all we did was log the row that they tapped, and we also deselected that row so it's no longer highlighted. When it came to our accessory, we call the function accessory button tapped for a row with index path, and that will also give us the section and row of the accessory buttons row. And we're logging that in the same way that we logged a user tap on a row. But in addition, we worked with our UI alert controller and popped up a little bit of a message box. Okay, so that's all the review. Now here's the new stuff. Let's create an index. And like I said, it's really easy to do. We first need to implement the function section index titles for table view. And this is looking for an array of strings. All we need is the array of strings that contains the strings for the index. So we'll return that index array that we created all the way up top here. It just says section 1, section 2 through section 5. And then we're looking for section index title. And what will happen is when the user taps on an index, we'll get a string. And that string, called title, will be passed into this function. And we can look into the array and return the index. And what they're looking to get from this function is the index of the section that should be shown when this particular index item is chosen. So we're essentially converting this string into a numeric index for the section. So we can, in this case, we just look into our index array and look for the string that's being passed in and return its index in the array because we've lined that up with our sections. Now you might actually use a dictionary if your sections are in a different order perhaps than your index. So we can use these two functions to create our index and to allow the index to know what section it should work with a corresponding string. So finally, let's take a look at all the features on our table view in operation. So here's what our table view looks like now. We have our section headers and footers, we have our rows, and we have our accessory views. And now we have our little index views. And when I tap on perhaps section 3's index, we can see it scrolls up with section 3 at the top of the screen. When I tap on 5, it goes to 5 and back to 1. So exactly what you would expect. It's pretty quick too. When I tap on a row, I get a little log that says the row was selected in section 2. And when I tap on an accessory, I get our message box. So that's the various features that we have in our table view. And there's a lot more that you can do with it, of course. And I'm sure you've seen it in various iOS apps where perhaps we've got multiple lines and pictures and such. But these are the basics of the table view that will get you started.